getting submitted. And the thing is, when we're listening to this form submit, we catch both of those. We catch the button click. We're not listening for the button click, but the button click submits the form. Hitting enter input submits the form, right? There's a variety of different ways that the form could be submitted. And so by listening to form submit, we're actually casting a larger net. So we're saying, since there's so many different ways for the form to submit, let's not listen to just a button click. Let's listen to just the entire form submission. So whatever way that the user decides to submit this form, we'll respond to that instead of something very, very specific like the submit button being clicked. Okay. That's good coffee. I put cinnamon bun coffee whitener in it. I don't usually use coffee whitener, but it's really delicious. Okay, so we're gonna make sure that this works by just console logging, hi everyone, okay? So super simple test. I really like to do this when I'm exploring new things, okay? When I'm not, now you might see me write 100 lines of code and run it with no errors and everything works. But again, I've been doing this for a long time. And when I start playing with new things, I often build in really tiny increments and have a lot of console logs everywhere, right? Because I'm not exactly sure what to expect. I'm not exactly sure if I'm doing this right. I don't like to build something that's too large and then that doesn't work at the end. And then it's really, really hard to debug. So I like making sure that I'm getting the right element, that my event listener is working, and that it's working like I would expect. So all I'm gonna do, console log, hi everyone, when this form gets submitted. Okay, so we'll refresh this page and we submit. And I swear for a second in my console, I saw hi everyone, but then it cleared and the page flashed. And you're probably seeing that too. That could have been your experience. And that is pretty common when we're dealing with forms. I mentioned it yesterday in chat, but it's not something that I mentioned in the class yesterday, and I neglected to, I forgot about it in an effort to try to squeeze as much as I could into the lecture. One of the things that we have to be careful of is some elements have default events. And we've never actually called them default events before, but we're familiar with them. So maybe not so much with forms, but one of the most common ones is links, like A tags. So if you put an event listener, if you just stop and think about this for a second, if you put an event listener on an A tag that listens for a click, you might be in for a little bit of a surprise, because typically, what do A tags do? I'm going to pause here so you can think about it, type it into chat. I want one person to interact with me. Otherwise, this is really hard. What do A tags do? They take you somewhere. Exactly. So A tags take you somewhere. So if I have if the A tag by default is driving the user away from your page, then how am I supposed to react to that event? And the answer is, well, we have default actions. There's a lot of default actions that are built in to the browser. And we can control those default actions, like link driving the user away, or form submission, refreshing the page or submitting the page somewhere else, by tapping in to that event. We want that event anyways, typically. Typically, we want to accept that event into the function. There's not a lot of cases where we don't. So to tap into that event, this function over here needs to take a parameter. Now, if I was using an inline function, it would look very similar. It probably looks something like this, event. But I'm not. I'm using this function declaration up here. Okay. Make grid. okay? And I'm gonna take that event in here. On this event, sorry, I'm just gonna pause this for 1 second. Okay, never mind. Just getting, I've just got about 15 emails. So I'm wondering if there's some emergency, but no one's coming in here, so. So we have this event, and this event has a method on it called prevent default. Event.prevent default means stop that default thing that you normally would do. So in the case of the link, it will stop the link from driving the user to another page. In case of the form, it will prevent the form from being submitted. I did share this with you on Discord. If the function is void, the parentheses are optional. No, there's no such thing as void functions in JavaScript, because void functions always return stuff in JavaScript, and the parentheses are not optional. Okay, we never put parentheses on event listeners. In functions, our callback functions never, ever, ever take parentheses. On submit only, yeah. Okay. Oh, this is bothersome. I did share this with you yesterday. I'm just making sure everyone, I didn't get a chance to, I can't trust that everyone actually heard and listened, but at least it's being recorded now. Okay, so you have something to go back to. So we can prevent the default on the form. So the default action, and this can show up anywhere in this function. The default action of the form, like the default actions of these events, so the default of the link, the default of the form, trying to think of any others that might have a default. Maybe when you're pressing play on a video or pressing play on a song, okay, that might be another default. The default action might be to play the video. Now, those don't occur until after your function runs. So you get the opportunity to do all your stuff first, and then the form will submit automatically. Or you can prevent the whole thing, which is what I normally do. When we get to the point where we want to actually submit, we want to capture something from the form and then perform some action and then finally submit the form, like preventing default will prevent that form from being ever submitted. And some of you might be wondering, well, like if I prevent the link from driving the user to another web page, because I want to do some stuff, how do I eventually drive them to that other web page after I did my stuff? We can deal with that later. Okay. So let's see now if we're able to successfully prevent this form from being submitted and console log hi everyone. Again, line 9 doesn't matter whether it's before or after, or as long as it's somewhere in our function. And there we go. Our form is no longer being submitted. Questions?
John?
Yes.
That 13 is at there because you have clicked it 13 times so far?
Correct.
Okay.
So that little number beside hi everyone has nothing to do with how many times I clicked it. It has to do with how many times the hi everyone is repeating. The console tries to save space by taking 13 lines of repeating hi everyone and collapsing it into one, and then instead starting to count the occurrences of that. If hi everyone was different every time, for example, if I added some sort of random number to it or a counter to it, let's a equals 0. And we said, when I ran this, a plus plus, and then I printed out that number plus a, okay? So I'm just doing a counter for every time I count this. You'll see that it prints out on a separate line because that string is different. But if
Yes,
that string was the same, it would just collapse all that stuff. So when you see that number, that's what that number is.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We can put prevent default anywhere in the function. Yep, anywhere. Before, after, doesn't matter. Because the default doesn't run until after the function is done. So as long as we identify like, hey, when we're done, don't do that default action that you normally do. That's essentially what we're saying. Okay. Okay. So we have prevent default. Now, that is not what we want to do, right? Our goal of listening for this function is not prevent default, is not to print something out to the console. Our goal is to essentially build a grid, right? And I'm actually not good. I don't think I'm going to use this function for this. I think I'm going to save this function for a little bit later. Okay, so forgive me here. I'm just going to do a little rearranging. So I'm going to put in anonymous inline function, prevent default, okay, instead. And I'm going to call this when I actually want to make the grid. And I'll pass in some stuff over here after. Okay. So let's see, how can I organize this so it might make sense? There. Okay. So we're in here. What we want to do is we want to grab the values from height and width, right? Because that is going to tell us how big of a grid we want to make. So in order to determine how big of a grid we want to make, we need to grab those values. Okay. So on click, we should go get those values. Well, how do we do that? Well, we do the exact same thing that we did over here. We get the elements. We get those elements. Okay. Now those elements have IDs right on them, so it makes it super easy. Okay. Makes it very, very easy. Those IDs are input height and input width. And I want to do that inside the submit function itself, inside the event listener itself. I could do it out here, and I'm sure a lot of you might have tried this. Const input height equals document dot get element by ID. Okay, and input width. And this is width. Okay, and if we try this, if we try these, we see we get the input for that one. Okay. And we get the input for this one. And we get the input for that one. So we get two elements here. Okay. Now, inside our event listener, we can grab those values from these elements because we got them already. These will occur immediately, like when the page loads. This only occurs once the form is submitted. So now that we have these, let's console log the values from them to make sure that we're getting the values out. So we go and try to get the values from these inputs when someone clicks submit, because that's when we care about the values. If you put, so first of all, how do we get the value out of an element? How do we get the value out of an input, right? We looked at a couple different things. We looked at text content, but text content gets the content out of an element. This is not content, this is a value. And so, Ray, you're right. We need to use dot value. And you might have done this. Some of you might have done this. The problem with this is that this gets the height and the width, HH. This gets the height and the width when the page loads. So even if I change these heights and widths, there's still one, because these two lines of code where they got the values was performed when the page loaded. And when the page loaded, those were 1 and 1. And so you often don't want to get the values when the page loads. You usually want to get the values when the form submits, right? Because that's the value I care about. You can get the element anytime you want, but you don't care about the value until the form submits. So now we have the element, we change this, and we get 10 and 11. Personally, I prefer to even move these inside this function, because I am the type of guy that doesn't like to do any extra work when I don't have to. And I would expect my browser doesn't have to do the same. Okay. So if I declare this input height and input width inside my event listener, then my browser doesn't automatically have to go get it. It only gets it when the user clicks submit. So that's one argument for this. The argument for leaving it on the outside is, well, now I only have to get it once at the beginning, and every time the user clicks submit, I don't have to re-get those elements, because every time you select an element from the DOM, your browser has to perform work. And work means resources. Work means memory. Work means, right, every time through a loop, every time through an if statement, every time your browser, every time lines of code get repeated, your code forces your computer to do work. And while this isn't a course in making optimal code, it's just something that you should consider when you're building. Okay. If the variable is declared in an event listener, is it global? No. This event listener contains a function. My variable is then scoped to this function. I cannot access input height and input width outside. So whether or not you declared it out here or inside, it really doesn't matter. Both have their advantages and their disadvantages. I just want to show you a couple. Yeah. So let's take a look to make sure this works. Since I moved these two lines from variable declarations outside to variable declarations inside. And that works fine too. So whichever one you want, no problem. All right. So we've got our form working. We're getting our input width. We're getting our input height. Okay. And we're able to console log those values. But I don't want to console log those values. What do I want to do with those values? I want to use those values to build my grid. And it just so happens I have this function sitting around called make grid, ready to go. I need some stuff in this make grid though. I need to know how many rows and columns there are going to be. So my idea is this function will make my grid. And so I will add two parameters here, rows and columns, rows and columns, and I will call it from inside this event listener over here. And I will pass it input height. Input height is rows, and input width is columns, right? Height is rows, row, 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 column, 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 column. Okay. And again, we can throw a console.log in here just to make sure everything's working. Rows, columns. If everything's working correctly, it should hit this function, it should pass these two values in, and then it should console.log it. And so let's come back over here, refresh this page, up, test it, good, everything's working. Make grid. Okay, everything's working. Now I can work inside this function because I know all this stuff is working here. I know this block of code is working. Okay, now we can put this up here at the top. I like to put my variable declarations at the top when possible. Makes it a little bit easier. Okay, same thing over here. Variable declarations at the top. I often like to put my prevent default right before the end and not just hide it inside. So I'm just going to do a little bit of reorganization here. It doesn't matter that I'm calling make grid before this. This is still gonna happen, right? This is line 15. This is not a return. This is just calling another function. Okay, this other function, make grid, will build the grid for me. Okay. All right. Now, sorry. Okay. So we have our rows and our columns. Now we need to build our grid. So to build our grid, and this is what I went over yesterday with a lot of you, we don't necessarily, I like to think of this like the stars or the movie theater example or the multiplication table example, right? And those were all nested loops because what we're doing is we're essentially building up a string, right? Well, depending on how you approached it, there's a couple different ways that you can approach it. But in my head, I like building up this string and then before I finally output it, right? That's what we did with the stars. We added a star, then we added another star, then we added another star, then we added another star, and that was all using nested loops. And then finally, when we finished, we printed out the stars. The only difference is we printed out the stars on the outer loop. This one, we're printing out we're appending the HTML right at the end once we're done both loops. So essentially, right here, last thing we do in make grid is append the HTML. So over here, before that, we're building the HTML. And you could build the HTML by building elements using create element. Okay, the create element, document.create element, doesn't actually insert the HTML until we tell it to. So it's creating a bunch of elements. So I'll give you two different flavors of this, and they're very, very similar. Okay, so the two different flavors are using document.create element and just creating a string. So let's start with this one. Okay. This one's a little bit trickier because I would need to start by creating a T-body element. Because I need an element, I need a parent element where all the other elements can go in, right? Because that's what I'm essentially doing. I'm going to be creating a row and then inserting that row into some sort of element. And I want to build up this element that I am carrying around in JavaScript that doesn't exist yet in the HTML, and then finally insert that element. Okay, and so to do this, you would probably use some sort of like, you need some sort of parent. In our last example, we used the UL. We used an ordered list. And so our parent was an OL. And then we ended up creating a bunch of other elements that were LIs, and we inserted them into that OL. And so that's kind of the same concept, is we would have to create some sort of parent element. T-body is like a table. It goes inside of a table. I know we didn't learn tables, but again, I don't teach everything because there's too much. But tables are fairly straightforward. So we'll say T-body equals document.createElement. And now we're going to take this and we're going to take our rows and columns, and this is where we're going to make our nested loop. So we're going to do a for loop for x less than let x equals 0, x less than rows x plus plus. Okay. And actually, x is row, right? I like to call my things what they are when I can. I use x and y a lot because a lot of times we don't have good names for them. But if we can, it helps really differentiate and make our code make more sense. Column less than columns, column plus plus. So we have our nested loop. So each time through the row, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new row. Const row equals document.createElement row. Sorry, it's not a row, it's a TR. Okay. And inside here, we're going to create a TD. And what are we going to do with this column? Or the cell, or whatever you want to call it. Okay. We are going to append it because TDs go inside TRs. So we're going to append row.append child cell. So we created a row. We're going to insert a bunch of TDs into this row. Then at the end, once we're done inserting all the cells into the row, then we're going to insert the row into the body. T-body dot append child row.
John, I have a sorry. I have a question.
Yep.
So the const row in the first for loop, wouldn't the name variable row like collide with the let row?
You are correct. Yep, you are correct. And so I need to give this another name. Let's call this TR. Let's call this TR. Let's just call this TD. That's actually better. TR, TD, T-body, TR. Thanks, Arya. Save me from embarrassment. Okay. So now we have we create a row, we loop through the total amount of columns that we need to, and we append cells to that row. Then we append the row to the body, and then we do it again. We do the whole process again for as many rows as we need, as many rows as was dictated by the input of the form. And finally, we end up having this T-body element. And if I console log T-body, we'll see that after I run this, we'll have this table body element that contains a bunch of rows and cells given the grid height and grid width. Now, this doesn't so this is an element like just any other element you could select, right? It's an element object. It just doesn't yet exist on the web page. So that's the last piece, is we need to insert it into the web page. So instead of console logging it, I'm going to say we need to append it to this table. We need to append it to this table, append child. We need to insert it into that table, which means we need to go get that table now. So we're going to get the element. So I'm just going to copy and paste this line, make a couple changes. And this element has an ID. So I'm going to double click on it. It's called Pixel Canvas. Get element document.get element ID pixel canvas, const pixel canvas, pixel canvas dot append child t body. Okay, and let's see how that looks. And we inserted a canvas that large. Our row and column start from 1 or 0 is fine because the default value is 1. It doesn't matter, right? What matters is here, row and column, whether or not we start at 1 or 0, is how many rows we're creating, right? If rows is 5, that means we're creating 5 rows. This runs from 0 to 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5. And that's what matters. Yeah, if we start at 1, then we have to say less than or equal, because we still need it to run 5 times if rows was 5. So then we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is 5. So it doesn't matter. Okay. So we're building, keep in mind, we're building this step by step, right? So we're obviously missing things. What if I push the button again? Oh, well, I get that. That's probably not what we want, right? And if I click the button again, that's probably not what we want. Interesting. How do we deal with this? And this is super common, right? Super common mistake, super common pattern is that we as users expect something specific. I expect as a user of this, that when I click this, choose a grid size to create, it destroys the previous grid and it creates a grid based on the size that I chose. I want 5 by 5. And then I click on it and I say, oh, that's too small for me. I think I want 10 by 10. Oh, weird, that's not what I expect. I expected this to be gone and it to turn into a 10 by 10. Well, how do I do that? Well, it's actually pretty easy. Before we append child, we need to destroy anything that's inside this table. So if we destroyed all the content of the table before we put more content in, yeah, we don't need to empty T-body. We have T-body, right? We don't need to empty the T-body here. This is the stuff that's ready to go. This is the new piece that needs to be inserted. What we need to do is we need to clear that old stuff out before we insert that new piece. And to clear that old stuff out, there's a lot of different ways. One of my favorite ways, it says super destructive. I think there's something called empty now. Text content equals empty string. We'll do it. Inner HTML equals empty string. Inner text equals empty string. You can do some sort of remove. There's a lot of different ways. Okay. I like text content equals empty string. It's fairly destructive. It will destroy everything inside. Everything. And so what this does, this line 16, is it gets rid of everything that was in there, even if there's nothing in there, right? When we're starting, the first time we run this, there's nothing in there anyways. But who cares, right? Empty it anyways. It's like having a glass of water that's empty and just going to the sink and turning it upside down just to make sure that there's nothing in it so you can fill it with other things. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not it's empty or full, we empty it anyways. And so this is, what this will do is now when we create a grid, and then we update the size of that grid, it destroys the previous grid first. It will destroy that previous grid first. Oh. And then it appends, and then it inserts our new grid. So take a look. Now we're going up to a 10 by 10. And there you go. These are the types, so when we're talking about problem solving, right? When we're talking about problem solving, these are the types of little problems that you're going to deal with, right? This is not something that you have the tools, right? And we're practicing our problem solving because these are the types of little things that you're going to deal with all the time. And if you watch you can go watch the video on Pixel Art Maker, okay, on how to do this, but you're taking away all the learning that you're going to get from solving these little problems, because this is the type of stuff we do all the time. And a lot of the stuff that you're building, there's no videos to watch, right? You got to make this up as you go along. Okay, I'll pause here. Any questions?
Could I take a look at this screen like frozen for like 20 seconds?
What do you want to look at?
I need to sink it in.
Sorry, what do you need? You said you need to look at a screen.
No, it's okay right now. Can you pause for like 15 seconds? I just need to read the code.
Sure.
And thank you.
Again, all this code will be available online after, right?
Thank you, I'm done.
Okay, excellent. Now, you could have done this as well with, instead of doing create elements, you could have started with an empty string. And then instead of create element, you could have done tBody plus equals tr. And then inside here, you're not declaring create element anymore. You're saying tBody plus equals td. And you're creating these like manually as strings. And then you don't append. It's actually shorter. It's actually a shorter way of doing it. You don't have to add the tBody in this way. The browser will automatically add it for you. You still have to get the pixel canvas. You still have to empty it. And then instead of append, at the end here, where you append child, you need to close your tr. tBody plus equals close tr. So we're just building up a string. That's all we're doing, a string of HTML. And it's just another way of doing it. And then right at the end here, instead of append child tBody, we would use insert adjacent not element HTML. And we need the location after begin tBody. Okay. And this will be a giant string of HTML that we built up. And this would do the same thing. So if we take a look at this, refresh, 5, 5, So it didn't like that. So I have an error somewhere. Column. This screen with column in my function. It shows column is declared but never read. Column. Okay. Didn't like something. There's an error that's showing up here. T-body plus equals T-body. Oh, I can't write to a const variable. That's fine. Yes. It's for the nested loop. And there we go. Okay, so we get the same thing. You could do it, you can either create the element using create element, which actually creates an element, or you can build up a string and then insert that string. This is not an element. This is not become an element until you insert it into the HTML. So those are the differences. Okay. Okay, so we're actually almost done. We have our giant canvas. Okay. The next piece is we want to add an event listener to these TDs in here. Okay, and this is the perfect type of location for Jen. The answer is yes. That's because it's part of your for loop. It should be. If you copy my code, then yes. Can you post both solutions of nested loop, please? Okay. So I'm going to copy this. Okay. So now we need to add an event listener to this giant thing here. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to use a delegate, to delegate the event listener up to our parent. Because we don't know, there's a couple reasons here. One, we don't know how many squares there are going to be in here. And the only way that we could really do this properly right now is we would have to say at the end here, or while we're creating each element, is add an event listener to that individual little box. And so we would end up in this case with 5 by 5, 25 event listeners, or in this case, 20 by 20, 400 event listeners, right? I don't think we want 400 event listeners. I don't think we want to spend time adding them or managing them, okay? Or I don't think it's good for the browser to have 400 event listeners attached to these little boxes when we can only have one attached to the entire thing, okay? And that's what we're going to do. So we're not going to do it in here in this function, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to do it just out here. We're going to add another event listener just below. Now we're going to add it to table. And actually, since I'm going to add it to table, I need this pixel canvas again. And if I need it a second time, maybe I don't want to grab it inside make grid. Maybe I want to grab it outside, so I have access to it. Because if it's only inside here, that means I can only, I actually should put it up here. I like that better because it's easier. But if I'm doing it inside here, if I'm only accessing it inside here, inside this function, it makes sense for me to declare it in here and go search for it in here. But if I need it in more than one place, then I should probably bump the scope up and this is a very common practice, when I'm building my stuff, I declare it in the place that I know I need it at the time. And when I realize that I need it somewhere else, then I'll increase the access to it, provide further access to it, right? I don't give everyone access to it right from the start. I increase the access as necessary as I start writing my code. So now this is accessible from this scope out here, which means I can now say pixel canvas dot add event listener, because I need to add an event listener to this table, right? When I'm using a delegate, when I'm delegating my events, I want to pick a parent to delegate it to. And usually it's the parent that contains all the stuff. It could be T-body. It very well could be T-body. But the thing is, I'm destroying T-body and recreating it every time, right? Because I'm doing it right here, T-body. So I don't necessarily want to add it on T-body, because once I destroy it, that event listener disappears. If there's an event listener tied to an element on your page and you destroy that element, that event listener disappears with it. If you insert a new element with the same ID, it doesn't matter. The event listener is tied to that specific instance of the element that was on your screen, which is now gone. So instead, I'm going to tie it to something that's not going to get destroyed, and I'm going to tie it to this table here, which is a common parent for all these boxes, and is very close. I like to keep it close to the children. I don't want to put, technically I could put it on body if I wanted to, because I'm going to be checking a lot of specific things anyways, but that's too much. Like, I don't want to put the responsibility on an ancestor, right? I want to keep it, I don't go to my great grandma and ask her to babysit my kids. I will go to grandma and ask them to babysit my kids. I want to go to a close ancestor. And so a close ancestor would be table. I'll give table the responsibility of managing all the event listeners for these TDs. So we'll put one event listener on that table. So we have the table, pixel canvas. We're going to add an event listener. So anytime anyone clicks anywhere on that table, we're going to run this function. And you can probably safely assume that this function, and this function is likely going to require event. We're going to need that event, but I'll save that. We're almost done, so just hang on, and then we'll go for a break. We need, first thing we need to do is we need to, while this event listener, so let's make sure this event listener works. Okay. Refresh. We make a table first. And let's see if this works when we click on elements in our table. Yeah, does it work out here? No. So that works pretty good. Okay, so only on our table, hi is being printed into the console. So I'm clicking, click, clicking out here, nothing happening, clicking in here, good. Everything's working well. Okay, so we have it on our table, but we need to be able to target the specific box that was clicked. And so we want to make sure that we are targeting that box. Now, you might have done this. Event. Actually, let's do this in a little different way first. So I want to show you something. The event, remember, the event.target is the thing that was clicked, the bottommost element that was clicked. So if we're penetrating through many layers, we penetrate through the table, and finally we get to the cell, and we can perform something on that cell, and that cell, that TD, we penetrate through the table, through the T-body, through the TR, finally down to the TD when we click on an area like this. Okay, finally down to the TD, through the table, T-body, TR, down to the TD, and that's the event.target. And we want to change that style to a specific background background color, right? What does the background color, what do we want the background color to be? And where are we going to get this information? And the answer is this input here. Now, depending on how you do it, you can have a couple different ways that this works. If you want it to be, if you want to grab the color of this color picker when someone clicks here, that means if I change the color of my color picker, and then click on another box, it will go and get the value again every time. Here, I'll show you. So let's first of all get this color picker. We're going to need this color picker anyways. So I'm going to put it out here, so that way we don't have to go get it every single time. And actually, I think I'm going to move these out there too. I'm going to move all my selectors outside of these. Just create a larger scope for these variables. Color. And this is going to be color picker. So let's see what the idea of this color picker is. Color picker. Okay, it's pretty easy. Color picker. So we have all these variables here. So these are obviously all accessible within these functions here. So I didn't really do very much. I just created a more global scope. Not a global scope, but a more accessible scope. And the color, the background color, is going to be color dot value. And this will take the value of the color picker at that time on line 49. When this line runs, it will go check the value at that time. So when I click on a square, it will go get the color of the color picker, black, and set the event.target, the lowest element, which is the TD, the style background color, to the color of the color picker. But we got a little bit of a problem here. It is not unlikely that someone comes around and starts clicking like crazy and accidentally hits one of these borders here. And if you click on the right border, you're going to not click on a TD by accident, and you're going to accidentally click on the T body or the TR and accidentally color an entire row, or accidentally color the entire table body, like you just saw me do. Let me refresh that and I'll show you again. We'll make a grid 10 by 10. And I'm going to start working over here and just hold the mouse and click and start to drag it. Will color. Yeah, or you can do that too. No, it doesn't work for me. There you go. Okay, if you click on the wrong element, it will grab the whole thing. Okay, and so not good, right? Not necessarily what we want. Here is something interesting though about how awesome our thing is already, is that we can pick a color, red, make this canvas, color it red, then we can switch our color, blue. And because every time we click on our element, it's getting the color at that time, the color in the color picker. That's pretty awesome, because we're saying color.value down here instead of color.value down here, up here. If we put color.value up here, it would always be black, because that's the color it was when the page loaded. So this isn't very good. And this type of action is not ideal when I click on that row right in between the two TDs, I hit a TR, okay? Not ideal. I don't want to respond to events that are occurring, the clicks that are happening on TRs, but I have this event listener on the whole table. So instead, what I want to do is I want to limit it and say, only respond, only color something if, only color something if the event dot target is a TD. And so to do that, we say if event dot target dot node name equals TD, now we color it. And this is how we write a delegate, how we delegate our events, how we write a delegate, how we delegate our events to the parent. So we put the event listener on the parent, and we're checking to see if the event.target, the thing that we clicked, the actual thing that we clicked is a TD, because we saw sometimes I can click between TDs and I hit that TR, I hit that border. Okay, so now we don't have this problem anymore. So I'm trying to click in between and I can't. And there you go. That is the solution. And so honestly, if I take out these comments, 32 lines of code. Okay, it's not super long, and it's definitely something that can be broken down into many different pieces. The important thing is you take the time to debug. Okay. All right. So, any questions? Questions, then break, and we'll come back. Just do. If you can't break that down for me, you have no business using it. You are doing yourself a disservice, okay? Because these things are for you to practice, for you to get good, so that way in the future, in month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, month 7, you are able to continue to solve these problems, because this doesn't get easier. Everything builds on top of each other. And if you can't do this stuff, then there's no way you're going to do this stuff. And at some point in time, you're just going to fall off that cliff, okay? Because you won't be able to keep your head above water anymore. So you have to do this stuff. You can't go and just steal stuff online, okay? I'm not taking point. There are pieces in this assignment where I see people use something, and then 2 lines after that, if they really understood that regular expression, they would have used it again. But they didn't, because the problem changed ever so slightly, and they don't understand what they were using in the first place. And so they couldn't apply it to this new, slightly different problem. And that's the problem. Okay, so be very careful. And so for those, I take away points. I say it's clear that you don't understand this, because if you understood this, then you would be able to apply it right here. But you didn't, which indicates a clear misunderstanding of what you're using. Okay, my assessments are, I'm looking for understanding. Some people wrote the ugliest code, but they only used stuff that we did in class, and I was thrilled when I saw that. So for those people who are, if you're reaching and you're exploring things, great. But if you're writing extremely advanced stuff that I have to go dig up and look into, there's a problem, okay? Also, a lot of this stuff can be found online. You know, if you want to watch people program, you can go watch them program. But watching people program does not make you a programmer. Solving problems on your own makes you a programmer. Okay. All right, so there's my rant. I usually go on that rant every year because this happens all the time, okay? And that is why I have a large group of people that usually are unsuccessful in this course. Okay, so for this afternoon, I'm going to ask you to build a bingo card. So we did Pixel Art Maker. Today we're doing bingo. Tomorrow we're going to do tic-tac-toe. So we're going to make a tic-tac-toe game. But today we're going to do a bingo card. I feel like it's a little bit easier. So I give you the sample files. Okay. It includes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, just like the ones in the Pixel Art Maker. And you'll use it to build a bingo card. You don't actually have to build the table with the bingo card. The bingo card's already built. If you're not familiar with the game of bingo, I've got a little link to a Wikipedia article about bingo. Okay. I'll show you what this card looks like. Okay, because I have one built already. Yeah, this one? Yeah, all right. So it's gonna look like this. Yours is not gonna look like, actually yours will look very similar to this because I've filled it out already with some numbers just to give you a sense of what it should look like, okay? Now it's gonna be your job to remove the numbers from the HTML. So you're gonna get this. You're gonna get this. Okay, and it's essentially this one's nicer. I updated it a little bit before I gave it to you. Your job is essentially to take these numbers and remove all of them, because when I refresh this page, this is the one that you're gonna get. These numbers are gonna stay the same, 13, 10, 12, 7, 14. And you can't even tell because nothing changes on the page. When I come back to the one that you're going to build, when you refresh this page, you'll see that the bingo card is different. It generates a new card every time the page refreshes. So which means we're generating some random numbers here. And if you remember from a couple weeks ago, I gave you a random number generator. So you can use that random number generator on this to generate these random numbers that you're going to be inserting into the card. Now, there's a couple of really interesting things that you're going to need to deal with. One, you can only generate specific random numbers for each column. So for example, in this column B, only certain numbers can show up, and that's numbers 1 to 15. I indicate that in this third paragraph here. So B is 1 to 15, I 16 to 30, all the way up to O 61 to 75. How bingo works is when a number is called out, users use their little dabber or they touch something on a screen, depending on how they're playing bingo, and it dabs it. Okay, oh, I got N38, I20, G59. Okay, and it colors the square. So a little similar to what we just did. Okay, except you don't have to build this box. The box is already built for you. Okay, you will have to add the interactivity component though. In addition to that, one of the things you're going to have to be careful of when you're building this bingo card is while B can only contain the numbers 1 through 15, one of the other things with bingo is that no number repeats on the board. So if this column is printing out 1 through 15, random numbers between 1 and 15, you will never see any number appear more than once. So I can refresh this page as many times as I want to generate random numbers, and the numbers never appear more than once. So 8, 10, 7, 15, 11. There's no other 8 that's going to show up on here, only 1. And so that is one of them. These two problems are two of the major problems that you're going to have to solve on this project. The third piece is we have this giant reset button here. And this giant reset button should reset the entire page, not refresh the browser page, not refresh the browser page. It should clear everything and regenerate a new bingo card. So we're going to need to add, you're going to need to add event listeners to work, to color the background of the right one. And I would suggest one single delegate event listener, especially if you want to get prepared for your assignment on Monday. You're going to need to prepare this reset. You're going to need to generate random numbers and make sure they only get used once. And that's your exercise. Feel free to work together. The important part is, of course, with that, is that you understand what you're doing. Are there any questions? We'll be reviewing this tomorrow morning. Well, actually, I'm going to touch base with you all at the end of the day to see how you're doing. If we have to delay it until tomorrow at lunch, just to give you a couple of extra hours to work on it, I would be okay with that because I have tic-tac-toe, which I'm going to give to you tomorrow and for the weekend. Question, no, you don't need to worry about unclicking the boxes. I thought about that. No, I thought if we're replicating, if you've ever gone to play bingo before and you're replicating what you would physically do in a bingo hall with like those little dabbers, once I dab the card, it's dabbed, right? I can't undab it. And so I was thinking of that additional replication. So no, once you click on it, that's it. Only the reset. The reset will undab it. It kind of gets rid of everything. Oh, and we also have this free space, but that you can probably just do with HTML. No, if you're, no, nothing happens when we win. That's hard. That's really hard. If you get to the point that you're done and it's like, you're like, oh, I know exactly how to do this, and you finish it in like an hour, and you want to tackle that, feel free. That is, it's not hard, but it's not easy. So again, if you want to take this one step further, detect when a card is a winner, and do an alert. This will help you a lot in your tic-tac-toe game tomorrow, because in your tic-tac-toe game tomorrow, I will expect you that you're able to, that your code is able to detect if the tic-tac-toe game is a winner. Any other questions? Great questions, by the way. I think you're all unmuted. So if you want to ask a question, talk to me. It's really, really eerie here right now. There's not a lot of people. Nothing. Oh, I hear someone.
Sorry.
Yay, hi.
Did you, sorry. Did you go through the part where we click on the letters of bingo or not?
Yeah, no, that doesn't do anything.
Right, okay.
Yeah, as you would expect, that doesn't do anything.
It's not in the...
No, it's not considered part of it. So how many of you don't know what bingo is? Just say in chat, I don't know. Yeah, okay. So you might want to take a quick look at, I'll give you a sample. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, all right. I'll do a little bingo with myself. So usually how bingo, yeah, and the page doesn't necessarily give you a good sense of it. I can explain it to you in 2 minutes. As a bingo player myself, okay? So typically people would get together in a large space and there would be a lot of people sitting at tables with a bunch of cards that look like this. Each card has random numbers that appear on it. I'll post a video after of YouTube of people playing bingo so you get a sense. Okay, so you might have 1, 2, 10 cards in front of you. Each card looks very similar to this. They all have random numbers on it and they're all shuffled in different in different orders. The only thing is B's always have 1 to 15, I 16 to 30, all the way up to O, up to 75. A traditional game of bingo would be played where you have one person who has a big, essentially a bucket of balls, and each ball has a number on it and a letter. So they would reach into the bucket and they'd pull out the ball, and the ball would say I-24, and they'd call it out to the room, and everyone who's sitting there with their cards who has a card that has I-24 would mark it. And they'd give about 30 seconds, and they'd reach into the bucket again, and they'd pull out another ball, O-63. And we'd look at my bingo card, and on my bingo card, I don't have an O-63, so I don't get to color that square. And they keep going and picking numbers, and as they call the numbers that you have on your card starts to fill up. In a traditional game of bingo, you would probably go with just as soon as you get a line, either vertically, horizontally, or diagonally of 5 numbers called, you would yell bingo, and you win. And it's usually a gambling game, so there's usually like money or a prize to be won. And once someone calls bingo, because they got all the numbers, a free is just a free space. It can count towards a line if you wanted to. So there's a line across. Once someone yells bingo, typically that game ends. Everyone throws away their card or crushes them up and murmurs under their breath, "Oh, I was only 1 number away." And then they start a new game with a new card, and the caller puts all the balls back into the bucket, and they start from scratch. And that's bingo. Yep. So it regenerates a card. I'll find a little video online of people playing bingo so you can see the action and excitement that you too can one day experience if you went to go play bingo. You can't go play bingo right now because the casinos are closed, but you could probably play bingo online. It is a slow game. It attracts a lot of old people or young people like me who don't like to spend a lot of money at the casino and who like just to sit around and socialize. Yeah, not right now. So, but I will find a little video and I'll post it in Discord. Any questions? I think you'll enjoy this one too. If you enjoyed yesterday's, I think you'll enjoy this one too. It's got a nice little problem to solve in there with the random number stuff. And again, if you figure it out really quickly, take the extra step and figure out whether or not the card's a winner. That's a tricky one and a fun one. Really, lots of different approaches for that. So the way I do it would probably not be the way you do it. Again, please, 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 use me as a resource. Call me on Discord, talk to me. I get lonely. I'm here. There's no one around me. There's no one even to talk to. So any conversation about programming, I invite. I'm here for you, okay? So let me know if I can help you. Let me know if I can help guide you along the right thing. If you just want to talk about something that you read about programming, I'd be more than happy to, okay? So that's it for today. That's the whole lecture. And then tomorrow is pretty much going to be the same thing. I'm going to review this in the morning, give you a new problem, tic-tac-toe. You're going to have the weekend. And that's about it. Any questions again before we go?